for the last few years, we've had the opportunity to end our We Lose with Paul Falcone. And this didn't come about by accident. This came about because of the feedback that we've received from our We Lose attendees. So we really do appreciate you taking a couple of minutes to complete that quick evaluation that we have at the end of the program, which when you complete that, you'll get your certificate and your SHRM and HRCI credits. But the positive feedback that we continue to get on Paul year after year, well, I think this is 3 in a row, right? If I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
Paul is our closing speaker, has just been off the charts. And we know that Paul has the background, the knowledge, and the ability to communicate this to human resources professionals for us to really understand and to see things that maybe are not always as obvious to us. But Paul just has an amazing way to do that. So it's a genuine honor for me to be able to introduce Paul again today. No doubt, like many of you, I've known Paul for a long time. Many of you may know him from his days and have worked with him or interacted with him. Many of you may know him as an author. But just to get you caught up on where Paul is at today, because his background and bio continues to expand. Paul is the principal of Paul Falcone Workplace Leadership Consulting LLC, specializing in management and leadership training, as well as executive coaching, international keynote speaking, and facilitating corporate retreats. So you definitely, hopefully, we'll have a chance to reach out to Paul if there's anything you need, and obviously you'll have his direct contact information. But if there's anything that he can do for you or your organization, by all means, we strongly encourage that you reach out to Paul directly and try to bring him in to help your organization. Again, Paul's former CHRO of Nickelodeon. He's held senior level HR positions, not just with Nickelodeon, but with Paramount, with Time Warner, with City of Hope. He's got extensive experience in the entertainment industry and healthcare and biotech and financial services, international work, nonprofit. He's worked in union environments, you name it. Paul's lived it and experienced it. He's the author of a number of books, many of which have been ranked as the #1 Amazon bestseller in the human resources category. And of course, we're looking at his brand new book right now, Leading Through Crisis, which he's going to be focusing on a little bit for us today. Paul is a constant speaker, works, you'll see him on the speaking trail through SHRM, he's publishing through HR Magazine. He's an adjunct faculty member at UCLA's Extension School of Business and Management, great keynote presenter, in-house trainer, webinar facilitator, you name it, Paul can do it. So that's it's hard to be brief in giving Paul's background because there's so much to address there, but we'll leave it at that. And Paul, it's my pleasure to turn it over to you.
That was the nicest introduction I've ever been given, Bill. So thank you. And for everyone else on the phone, I have not been barking. I just want to let you know that wasn't me. Someone's still barking out there. Someone might want to put the little mute button on, but I thought it was very cute hearing all the barking in the background. I don't know. I have a good sense of humor with this stuff. Hi, you guys. I know this is the last session, so we're going to jam through this. I know you've been through a lot. This is not meant to overwhelm you because on top of everything else you get at WeLu, my presentations, obviously I'm the non-lawyer in the group, but the idea would be practical stuff that hopefully you can apply back in the workplace. So a 30-second story about this book. HarperCollins, the publisher, said there's a book called The First Time Manager that came out in the 1980s. It's in its 7th edition. It sold 500,000 copies. We want to build a whole library under it. Paul, are you up to doing The First Time Manager HR? And I said, absolutely, I'd love to. So I wrote that one. That one comes out in May of 2024. But they said, before you write that one, we want you to write one that can pair with the other books, First Time Manager Sales, First Time Manager, marketing, IT, whatever it happens to be. What's a book that they could pick up that they would say, well, I want the First Time Manager Sales, but I also want this other book. And they said, think about it, give it some thought. And I said, I don't have to. I can tell you right on the spot, it's Leading Through Crisis. Everybody I know feels like they're, we're building the plane while we're flying it. We're exhausted. COVID has had us gone through a washing machine how many different times, and we're still trying to stay with our heads above water. But I said, I really want to write a book on crisis leadership because I think that's really where it's at. And they said on the spot, go for it, let's do it. And that's how this book came out. So it just came out in September. It's 2 months old-ish. And I'm proud of it because it's one of those things that, COVID was hard for all of us, you guys. Some of us were fortunate enough to let it help us build our careers. And I'd like to think in a very humble way, it kind of made lemonade out of the lemons, so to speak. I was able to pull something positive out of there. That's something that I think I can share with people. That handsome fellow would be me. My website is there. It's just paulfalconehr.com. Bill, you gave so much background on me. Thank you for that. So yes, entertainment, healthcare, biotech, and financial services are my background from an HR standpoint. It was last summer of 22, that I cast off my corporate persona and I opened my own consulting firm. So it's been about 1.5 years and I'm really, really enjoying it. I'm having a lot of fun. People know me for the books, mostly on this screen. A lot of my books start with numbers 75, this, 101, that, 96, and whatever, that kind of thing. But those were the books that I've historically been associated with. Last summer, when I launched the consulting firm, HarperCollins came out with a new book series, and it was called the Paul Falcone Workplace Leadership Series. Really honored that they used my name in the title. But again, since these came out last spring of 2022, the new book just came out in September of 23, which is the one we'll talk about today. And then we've got one coming out in May of 24, which is the First Time Manager HR. So lots of writing going on in this boy's life, that's for sure. For today's agenda, the way I structured the book, you guys, was let's look at just keeping it simple. What are the individual crises? What are the departmental crises that you'll face as a leader? And what are the company crises, which can include global crises like a pandemic? And I thought it's a good opportunity for us to close the day by recapping some of this stuff, because really, truly, I hope it can help us heal a little bit, all of us. We are going faster than the speed of light. The sense of change, disruption, anxiety, exhaustion that your employees are feeling, it's a schizophrenic market. 6 months ago, it was the Great Resignation. Then it was followed by the Great Regret. They all wish they had their jobs back, right? Companies can't find talent. There's talent scarcity. Yet at the same time, in certain industries, they're laying off by the bucketful. What do you make of all this stuff? It's a crazy time. To give perspective, and I think it's important that we look at this from the 30,000-foot view, not just from where we live in the weeds every day. There will come a point when one of your grandchildren is going to say, Grandma or Grandpa, what was it like for you going through COVID from roughly 2020 to 2022? And when you came out of that, in that post-COVID reintegration phase, which your grandchild will probably not say it that way, but right, 2023, 2024, what was it like? Tell us the stories. This has been that big of a game changer for all of us. Again, it was only up until summer of 2022 that I was sitting in the HR seat, and I was a CHRO of the Motion Picture and Television Fund out in that Woodland Hills, Calabasas area, beautiful area, but it's basically a retirement home. And going through COVID in a retirement home was ground zero. It was really, really tough. We lost employees to the virus. We lost residents and patients to the virus. If you remember, COVID started in a retirement home in Seattle. That's when we first heard about it as a nation. So the reality was it was a tough way to get through it, but I think it changed who I am fundamentally in terms of building character, respect for others, a greater level of appreciation for everything I do. So that's kind of where I'm coming from, you guys. I'd like to think this book calms the room. This book gives people tools, but gives people back to themselves. We all need to be able to do our very best work every day with peace of mind. And truthfully, we haven't had that. And part of it is not our fault. Part of it is politics. Part of it is what's going on with wars in this country. Part of it is immigration challenges that we're facing. Part of it is gun violence. I mean, the list just keeps going on and on and on. And in a 24/7 news cycle, it locks in and it doesn't let us go. And we have to know how to separate those lines. We have to know when to shut off the TV, basically, so that we can find that peace of mind. And I hope I can do that in today's session a little bit. What I wrote about in the workplace application, when you read about this, is it's crisis management and intervention helps us hone our skills, helps us become better communicators and team builders. It is a tumultuous business environment, but it can make us stronger, right? Number Two, 2024 ushers in volumes of sweeping changes. All right, some of them I just mentioned. But the bottom line is, how do you lead your operational leadership teams? If you're a small business owner, if you're an HR practitioner, whatever it is that your role is, like, what is your influence going to be on the organization? What do you want it to be? And what do you want people to say about you? Oh, yeah, I know Paul Falcone. He's fill in those three dots. The second half of that sentence, that's your brand. That's your leadership brand, your communication brand, your team building brand. And give thought to that, because really, from an executive coaching standpoint, it really is all about you. When coaching is happening, it's helping people come to the realization that A, you're a good person. B, you're really, really working hard. C, sometimes this is really, really hard. But the most important thing is it's harder than we're making it. We've got to kind of get back to basics, everybody. We got to slow it down. We got to simplify things. So anyway, I say there are no means a gloom and doom approach. Basically, I'm very positive and optimistic about the changes that are coming, but we've still got a road ahead of us, that's for sure. Okay, in terms of management and leadership consumed with unforeseen challenges, they're coming at alarming speeds with increasingly more dire consequences. I think that's true. We know about technology. We know about globalization. The changes truly are exponential in nature. It is amazing that in October of 2022, if you ask the average person on the street, what does AI stand for? You'd be lucky if they can tell you artificial intelligence. Most of them wouldn't even know that. In November of last year, ChatGPT comes out. Now it's all we're talking about. On the one hand, it's great. How is this going to impact HR? How is this going to impact business operations? This is all well and good. But we're also seeing prominent people like Elon Musk saying it's the end of the world, that basically the whole world is coming apart. And that gets locked into the news cycle. And then we get to worry about something else, something that we didn't know about in October of last year, but in November, the world is going to end. We've got to kind of distance ourselves from that craziness. And in that standpoint, I'm glad I'm doing this presentation last, because with all the changes coming out in the legal space and everything else coming up in the new year, it's good that we kind of get our feet back on the ground. I think that's the healthiest way to end a full day training session like you've had today. Okay, next. For the first time, we're experiencing 5 generations in the workplace at the same time. It's never been more than 3. But when I was at Motion Picture and Television Fund, we hired our chief nursing officer. She was 78 years old. That's not uncommon anymore. But you also have 16 and 17 and 18-year-olds. You got 5 of these groups, 5 of these generational cohorts working side by side. We've got to talk about that. We know unions are aggressively attempting to come back, right? They're trying to make their arguments, which I understand in today's environment. Some of you may believe that unions do play a positive and constructive role. The DEI and B movement, the wellness and the well-being, Gen Z, the Zoomers, the 25 and under crowd are statistically the most isolated, lonely, and depressed generation on the planet, even more so than retirees in retirement homes. That's kind of scary, but this is the first truly digital generation. And it's our job to sit around the campfire and find new ways of passing wisdom from the elder generation down to the new generation. We've got to bring them in because they are isolated and they are lonely. And what is our responsibility? Talk about corporate social responsibility. What is our responsibility as leaders? To make sure the younger cohort feels like they can thrive, they can do their best work, and they belong. Next, we talk about study the motivators and the drivers of Gen Y and Gen Z. They're currently 40% of the workforce, but that's changing very quickly. The baby boom will be gone by 2029. They're done. And then there's a gap because the baby boom was followed by Gen X. And Gen X was the birth control generation, right? In 1964, they introduced the birth control pill. The baby boom quickly became the baby bust. So when the baby boomers retire, roughly 2029 to 2031, it's followed by a massive shortfall. I mean, the baby bust generation is tiny. Now, granted, the millennials are the biggest of them all. The millennials right now are basically 45 and under. But it's going to take some time before the millennials can step into all those C-level roles. So we've got some scarcity coming in terms of talent. We can see it. And this is a global phenomenon in all industrialized nations, not just in the United States. Talent scarcity is real. It's here to stay. If you want to read a good book on it, I could recommend The Next 100 Years by George Friedman. It's a New York Times bestseller, The Next 100 Years by George Friedman. But basically, China, Europe, Asia, I mean, they're all going to be facing these same challenges of not having enough people to do the work. And they're talking about incentive plans to bring people in and give them fast tracks to citizenship. China already has a 30-year infrastructure plan with Africa. So at least they know where they're going to be able to find people. But things are changing quickly in a quickly changing world. So anyway, you'll benefit most from learning how to hire effectively, how to manage and motivate your team, how to act ethically and morally, how to hold people accountable. This is kind of the stuff that I love to write about. Because truthfully, even if you have an MBA from a top 10 school, they don't teach leadership in the trenches. You've kind of got to figure it out on your own. Experience has to be your greatest teacher, which isn't the worst thing in the world. I get it. For most people, that's what happens. But my focus as a writer is in shortcutting that. There's no reason that you can't benefit from my 3 decades in the trenches, so to speak, and take shortcuts and figure out how to build your own career a little bit more wisely, a little bit more aware, and certainly not step on landmines all the time. So I'd rather not leave everything to experience if I can do that. Okay, next, Gen Y and Gen Z. So you know, these 5 priorities are my own. These are not published. These are not the ones that everyone says we agree on. But the reality, you guys, from every survey I've seen, these are the 5. It's hard. I'm hard pressed to find something that doesn't fit under one of these categories. Smart companies will look at this. This is the future of your workforce. Gen Y millennials are 45 and under. Gen Z Zoomers are 25 and under, right? What do they want? They want career and professional development. That comes in survey after survey after survey. Diversity of thoughts, ideas, and voices. There's your DEI movement. They want work-life family balance, control, and equilibrium, and that preceded the pandemic. In a way, when COVID hit and we had to work remote, yeah, we had just-in-time technology like Zoom and Microsoft Teams to make this possible, just like we're doing today. But the reality is that preceded it. And actually, working remotely has given a number of employees a sense of greater control in their lives and in their careers. It's not a bad thing. But now we've got the tug of war. The CEOs are suffering from what they call productivity paranoia. They want the people back in the office. Right. Well, they also were worried about Gen Z, the Zoomers. They want to make sure these people feel socialized. They're part of the culture, that they're not lonely and isolated. They also want to make sure that they have a healthy and robust culture. They want to make sure that collaboration can happen, which does happen a lot more naturally in person than it does over a scheduled Zoom call. So CEOs aren't wrong to do this. But we're still at a phase where talent is at a premium. And a lot of people are saying, look, if you want me to come back, see you later. I'm going to get my resume out there and go someplace else where they'll let me work remotely. So we're in this tenuous period, but probably between 2024 and 2026, we'll continue to see where this goes. I don't think remote work, at least, partial hybrid is going anywhere unless you're in a job like a nurse. A nurse has to be on site. There's no, you can't do your job remotely. But I'm saying for corporate jobs and other types of jobs, we'll see this. It will continue to change, but just see it as a natural balance right now. We are coming out of the greatest pandemic we've seen in over a century. And we're still figuring this out. We still have supply chain problems. We still have talent problems. All of this is real. But when you keep it in perspective from that 30,000-foot view, you can breathe out a little bit. You can let your shoulders down. The reality is we're going to get through this, and we're going to get through it together. And now it's through this adversity that we really build and we hone who we are as people. Corporate social responsibility and environmentalism, there are very inexpensive things that you can do, we'll talk about it, to get your employees in the loop so that they know that you, the employer, are hip, you're not tone deaf. You realize that people want to make the world a better place. They want to work for an organization that contributes. So there are some really easy ways that you can do that. So we'll talk about that. Finally, they want to work for an ethical employer doing meaningful work for a management team that cares about them personally. Again, not rocket science. I'm a boomer. I wanted the same thing when I was out of school, but my generation wasn't studied as much as the current generations are. So it's good to kind of keep an eye on the ball. This is the 30,000-foot level goal. But as long as this is in the back of your mind, you will be on target. You will be in sync with where your employees are. Now, looking at individual crises, everybody, what I wrote about in the book, termination and layoffs, EAPs and dealing with employees in crisis. Watch out for ADA regarded as claims, that if you make a mandatory referral to an EAP, a plaintiff attorney could argue that you definitely perceive the person as being disabled in terms of their mental health, and it could create additional protections, which could carry punitive damages. You've got to be careful about formal EAP referrals, but still important to write about. Encouraging employees to leave when there's no progressive discipline on file. Whistleblowers versus character assassins. When you're the accused, you didn't do anything, but your employee kind of figured out that you're kind of coming after them. And so they go to HR and they complain about your conduct before you have a chance to complain about their performance. And they start using words like discrimination and harassment and retaliation. Remember this, leadership is a team sport. Don't sit there with that hot potato in your lap. Get it off your lap. Give it to your boss. Give it to HR. Give it to your department, division legal. Give it to somebody. But when the clock stops and the thing goes boom, if you're the only one who knows about it because it's in your lap, you've made a big mistake. That's a rookie mistake you need to avoid. The way we solve things is together. Okay, together we find the resolution. It is not a every man is an island. You're a manager. You don't need to tell anyone. You can fix it yourself. That's baloney and that's naive. And employees do get coached by lawyers who tell them, go complain to your HR person about your boss before your boss has a chance to take any disciplinary action against you. This happens. I've seen it multiple times. So raise that wisdom back in the office after today's session so that your managers are aware that, especially if you're in HR and you're listening right now, they should be coming to you. They should be partnering with you. Their job is to get the hot potato off their lap by, number one, sharing it upward with their boss, and number two, sharing it sidewards with human resources. Then they are acting within the course and scope of their managerial discretion. However, should they be acting outside the course and scope of their managerial discretion, personal liability can apply. Companies can sit back and say, sorry, Paul Falcone, you're on your own. We trained you on this stuff. You did it anyway. So don't sue us, sue him. And that's real. That the company's general, legal counsel will not necessarily be supporting me on this. I won't get that legal protection. And in many states, you can be sued for up to $50,000 for what's known as managerial bad acts. Again, acting outside the course and scope of your managerial authority. Except in California. In California, there's no cap. Hear that silence? Can't tell you how many times I've had to have those kinds of discussions with MD, PhD doctors or with producer director types who think no one can touch them. It's like they need to understand this and they need to hear it from us. So anyway, these are the things that I've written about, but I want to go just quickly through something. On the back of an envelope, some of you may have heard this one. If you have, because you've heard me speak before, it's so important. Don't mind, I'll repeat it again. When you've got someone, for example, who thinks their performance is so good they can't be touched, but they're toxic, they're difficult to work with, they're condescending, they're abrasive, everyone cuts a wide swath around them. Draw a circle on a piece of paper, cut that circle in half. You do that on the back of an envelope, right? In the top half, write the word performance, and in the bottom half, write the word conduct. And you can talk to someone about, you're knocking it out of the park on the top half of the circle, but I have to hold you accountable for the full circle. And right now on the bottom half of that circle where it says conduct or behavior, whatever you want to call it, I have to be honest with you, you're not meeting expectations right now, despite your fabulous sales growth. The truth of the matter is, if I had to give you a review right now, I would show that you're only partially meeting expectations. You're not fully meeting expectations because you're responsible for the full circle, as am I, as is everybody else. So that kind of conversation is important. And what I've done is I've mapped it out so that you don't have to take notes on this stuff, you guys. You've got it in the deck. But I want you to be able to explain it so that it's in the employee's best interests. Here's what it might sound like. And here's what you can teach your operational managers, senior leaders back in the office. Tony, I wanted to meet with you privately to discuss something that I think is important to your career. And they say that the most important decisions about your career will be made when you're not in the room. That's the same for you as it is for me, as it is for everyone else. There's something that might be missing awareness that could potentially hold you back over the long term. And I'd like to discuss it with you right now, if you'll allow me. In other words, I kind of want to have your back through this, so that you can master it, so that you can influence what's being said about you in that proverbial room at some point in the future when you're not even there to protect or to defend yourself. Do I have your okay to proceed? Sure, Paul, what's up? Okay, look, right now you're knocking it out of the park with your performance, which is great. But that only accounts for half of the contribution to our organization or any other. You're equally responsible for what I call your conduct or your behavior, the bottom half of this circle. In other words, how you're coming across to others, your reputation for building those around you, for serving as a role model in terms of your leadership and your communication. That's where you're falling short right now. Again, if I had to give you a performance review at this point in time, I'd say you're only meeting half of the expectations, and 50% is not a passing grade. That's why I'm bringing it up now. So you can show demonstrable improvement by the time your annual performance review comes around. And I'm not saying this to offend you. I'm not saying this to judge you, Tony. And I certainly don't want to hurt your feelings, but your peers tend to avoid you. They use words like confrontational, aggressive, condescending. I even heard one person say toxic. And they basically talk about cutting a wide swath around you rather than having to deal with you. Does it totally shock you to hear that? Be honest with me. Well, no, Paul, it doesn't. But, I'm always, hold on, Tony. You don't have to defend yourself. Okay. There's no attacking here. There's no defending. I'll listen to your side of the story. I just kind of want to open this up. But truthfully, it's a perception problem at the least. Right. But I have to hold you accountable for your own perception management as I do everyone else. I'll put it this way. I'd like to be the person to help you with this. I'd like to be the career mentor and the coach that you think of 20 years from now. And you'll say, oh yeah, that Paul Falcone boy, he really helped me. I knew I was kind of acting outside of the lines, but he was the only one who ever told me that. And I want them to talk about you as Tony And, not Tony But. Not, oh, I know Tony, he's a top producer, but he's really hard to deal with and people don't like him. I want it to be, I know Tony, he's a top producer and everybody seeks his opinion. He's the funnest guy at the party. Tony makes us all better at what we do. He shares openly. He teaches us his tricks. If you can become the Tony And rather than the Tony But, it will change the trajectory of your career forevermore and you'll feel better about yourself. Now, listen, whether you want me to serve as your mentor and your coach to help you through this, I'm putting the offer out there, okay? There's an olive branch, but my expectations are going to remain the same either way. You'll need to contribute more to a greater sense of teamwork, camaraderie, inclusion, belonging, or I'm really going to have to question your ultimate fit factor on the team. What are your thoughts? Well, all right, Paul, it's a lot. You've thrown a lot at me, but I'm definitely listening. All right, so let's talk, Tony. What might that look like in terms of the feedback that you just heard right now that I shared, which I know wasn't easy to hear? Tell me a little bit about that. What's your side of the story? And now you can go into this dialogue. That's what coaching is, right? Yeah, I'm being honest with him. I'm telling him what's going on, but I want to feed him the information so he can come to the realization that it's in his own best interest to turn the behavior side of the circle around. Yeah, performance is great, but performance doesn't work all the time. I don't care that you've been here 30 years. I don't care that your uncle is the CFO. I don't care about those things. You're responsible for the full circle, just like I am. And these kinds of coaching conversations can really make a difference. Now, when you talk about the termination discussion, let me move on to something else in the interest of time. Don't terminate it Friday at 4:30. That doesn't make sense. When people are terminated, they're that way, they're swept out, swept under the rug, right? It's like they never existed before. Make them go away. And to an unhealthy mind that has a vacuum of Saturday and Sunday to think about these things. Workplace violence often happens on Monday morning because they're so angry and they've had no one to talk to. Terminate early in the day, early in the week. I'd rather you do Tuesday at 10 than Friday at 4:45. Early in the day, early in the week, and help that person heal. Tony, I know you've been trying to meet expectations outlined in these notices you received. I appreciate that. And please don't think that we see this as a lack of effort on your part. It's just sometimes we come to the realization that our interventions are not really sustainable in terms of matching a person's efforts or talents with our needs. It becomes best to separate employment. To the extent you're comfortable, please make me your concierge. I'll help you with your resume. We can role play. for an interview. I'll be happy to answer questions you have regarding your COBRA application, your unemployment insurance, anything else that comes your way. I'll always prioritize your call, and I'll be here for you if you need anything. I'm sorry that this happened, Tony, but the final words I want you to hear from our company is thank you. I want to thank you for everything you've done for us over the past 2 years, and I'll miss working with you. When that's what your termination sounds like, you will have people who, listen, they're still not going to be happy, but they can heal. They can move on in a healthy way. Too many times managers are uncomfortable. They strip people of their dignity. They can humiliate them. The body language comes up, hard language. This is what's happening. You are terminated. Stop. If you were on the receiving end of that message, how would you feel? You be the average bear. Would you want to hear that message from yourself? And if so, what would it sound like? Okay, so just give that some thought, everybody. But there's an iron hand with a velvet glove in here somewhere. Yeah, I'm still making the termination decision and it's hard to do. But the velvet glove says, I still care about you. I still appreciate you. I still thank you for everything you've tried to do. And we don't look at this haphazardly. We do appreciate everything you've tried to do. I hope you can respect our decision, but we need to move in a new direction. It helps people heal. Now, when you look at departmental crises, it's different. Mediating employee disputes, dealing with burnout, conquering quiet quitting, motivating staff without money or promotional opportunities. I just wrote that article in SHRM's HR Daily newsletter a couple of weeks ago, if you saw that one. Putting a quick end to bad habits, F-bombs, and harassing, bullying behavior, toxic team turnarounds. This is the employee relation stuff that I grew up with. So this is what I was most comfortable writing about over the years. But one of the things I'll tell you is this, everybody. If you really want to build wisdom in your leadership team and your frontline operational leaders and your senior execs, talk to them about values-based leadership. Folks, the challenges we're facing can really be difficult nowadays, and I know it. And my goal is to help you do your very best work every day with peace of mind. But it's important that you understand what my professional values and my motives are. And I wanted to take this time to kind of share with you what my expectations are so that we can get in sync. I mean, pretty much any challenge I face through my career can be captured on this one sheet that I'm about to hand out. It's got a dozen points on it, but I want to talk to you about them. I'm happy to discuss this with you one-on-one afterwards. I invite you to share with me or with others what your core values are as well, not necessarily in this meeting. We can do that as a separate follow-up meeting. But let me tell you what mine are, just so you know. And now you can go through a list. You can have 3 of these, 5 of these, 8 of these, 10 of these, probably not more than 12. But example, have one another's backs. Always bring out the best in one another. That alone covers your employee code of conduct, your employee handbook, your policy and procedure manual, and everything in between. Always have one another's backs and bring out the best in others. And when I talk about that, I say to my team, tell me what that will look like. Tell me what that would feel like. And what should we be doing differently? And then you can go down, follow the leader as coach model, demonstrate accountability, focus on your career and professional development. That's important to me for you. I want to make sure it's important for you as well. Have fun, lighten things up a bit. Let's celebrate success more. Do your very best work every day with peace of mind. You've heard me say that already. And no drama. Life is too short. I did a lot of drama as a kid. I don't do it as an adult. You guys need to know that. Don't step on a landmine where drama is going to happen. And if I ever look at you and say, big D, I'm starting to feel the big D, you know what I'm coming at. So the funny thing is, everyone can agree on these things, and you can create your little symbols and you can create your little wink, wink. And, you know, if I say big D, you know what that means. But ask people to do it on their own. People are only going to share positive values, and what their values are is important to share with the rest of the team. It makes life easier. You guys keep this one sheet front and center on your desk going forward. We're going to use it to diagnose any situations that go wrong and improve, both as individuals and as a team. Otherwise, I appreciate having the opportunity to share my career and personal values with you. Happy to answer any questions that you can think of now, but if you want to sleep on this, we can pick up with this in next week's meeting. You can share your own. Tell me what you think. But I wanted to spend one meeting just talking to you about values, because I think handbooks are great and policy and procedure manuals are wonderful. But the truth of the matter is they live in the cognitive world. This stuff is in my emotional world. Okay, this is who I am as a person. So I wanted to be able to share that with you. You will be surprised. Give them the points. Tell them, don't use these points. They're someone else's. Make up your own. But that's important to me, okay? Now, the next thing is, with the multi-generations at work, we talked about the baby boom generation was born in 1946 after World War II, and it ended in 1964 with the introduction of the birth control pill. Something happened that no one paid attention to in this country. In 2011, the first baby boomers turned 65. So it's 18 years. It was 18 years of 77 million babies being born, 10,000 a day in this country. Well, guess what? From 2011 to 2029, again, 18 years, we have 77 million people moving into retirement, 10,000 people a day moving into retirement. And the problem is it's followed by Gen X, the baby bust generation, which is only half its size. Luckily, by the time the Gen Y millennials came around, they were 80 million. They were bigger than the baby boom, which is great, but it's just going to take some time. There's going to be some gaps in there. The good news is if you want to work till you're 90, you're going to be able to do it. You're lucky. You're welcome. But the reality is, this is real for all of us, you guys. And this is not just in the United States. That pill was introduced globally. Okay, China's one-child only policy went on for far too long. South Korea has the lowest birth rate in the world. Japan has 125 million citizens. By 2050, they will have 88 million citizens, the average age being around 60. Where's the work going to come from? The industrialized world is having all these challenges with talent. Now, luckily, the globe keeps going more, higher and higher. We just hit 8 billion residents for the first time. That's good, but those are not in industrialized countries. Those are in poorer countries where they have 15 and 20 children sometimes to make sure that someone's around to take care of them in their older age. They don't have Social Security programs. But how do we move that talent across borders? That's really where our future lies. It's in talent management and talent development. As we move on, by the time we get to 2030 and beyond, talent acquisition is always going to be important, but talent development is going to be more important. You got to know how to grow your own. You're not going to be able to run an ad necessarily on LinkedIn or on Indeed and have all these candidates sending in resumes. You're going to have to learn how to grow talent. Better to teach your managers how to do that now, because if they get good at talent development, they are way ahead of the curve. Now, when it comes to multi-generations at work, I will tell you this. The bottom bullet is the most important. The Intern is a movie with Robert De Niro and Anne Hathaway. You guys, you need to watch that at work with your employees, because it's darling, it's funny, it's hysterical, it's cute, but it really shows how this works. If you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about. Robert De Niro is the retiree who comes back as an intern in a startup that's run by Anne Hathaway, who's the CEO. That's all I'm telling you about the movie. But they learn so much from him. He learns so much from them. It's a beautiful way to start conversations about multi-generations at work. And then all the other bullets can start making sense, right? You can do coaching and you can do reverse coaching and mentoring, right? Because the kids need to teach the elders too. It goes both ways. But once you pull people into that inclusive environment, when they say DEI and B, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, to me, the B is the most important part. Everyone should feel like they belong. Everyone should feel like they're welcome. There should be no exceptions to that. And that's hopefully where we move our HR practices and our leadership practices as we move forward. Now, one other thought on that before we move on to this topic. The idea, everybody, is you will know when your team is about to blow a gasket, okay, or a blood vessel or something. We went through it a lot at the Motion Picture and Television Fund because we were overwhelmed, we were exhausted. It was really, the rules kept changing about masking and PPE. We had to open up our own, isolation unit for people who had, COVID. We had to build our own laboratory. I mean, there was just so much that went on. Sometimes you just need to quiet the room and call people into a meeting and say, you guys, I invited you to this meeting on a voluntary basis, right? In a very professional, respectful manner. I want to know how you're feeling. So much is changing before our very eyes, our truths, our laws, our values, things we've accepted as givens our entire life. I sense an underlying tone of anger and aggression, not just in our department, but in society as a whole. I want to make it safe for you guys to express your concerns, but you have to do so carefully. Before we begin talking about how you're feeling about what you're experiencing, I'll ask you to follow a few simple rules. First, there can be no attacking. There's no need for defending. We're here to support one another and make sure we can lower the level of tension that sometimes creeps in the workplace. Second, this cannot be about personal opinions. There's no red hats and blue hats or any of that stuff. Only about how we're feeling about the pace of change and how it's affecting us. If you're shocked by the politics, you're angry about the school shootings, you're exhausted from the pandemics, simply frustrated about the amount of work or stress that you're experiencing because we don't have enough people to do the work, I welcome you sharing it here in a safe setting. But this isn't a forum for debating your personal opinions, and I have to make sure we're all clear on that. And finally, I get to blow the whistle and act as the referee if anything gets too hot or contentious. I get to press the relief valve, and it has to be respected by everyone in the room. Everyone clear, and does everyone agree? Now, when you start with that kind of meeting, everybody, you're going to see their heads start to, and you're going to see the look in their eyes, because I'm telling you, everyone needs this. At the conclusion of the meeting, you can close it. You can heal it. Folks, I hear you. I think we've done a good job of hearing out one another and everything we're going through. And I'm realistic enough to realize that one sit-down meeting with your HR psychiatrist over here isn't going to resolve all these ongoing issues and frustrations that we're experiencing, no matter what side of the divide we fall on. But it does give us a chance to level set, to reset expectations regarding civil and professional behavior towards one another, to remind us all that we all have one another's backs, and to help us focus on the fact that we have a lot more in common than there is that sets us apart. If you guys ever want to talk to me one-on-one, you can. If you feel like it's time to have another one of these meetings, because if I do, I'll call the meeting. I'll still do it on a voluntary basis. But if you feel like it's time to have a meeting like this too, then we'll do it. So you just tell me what your thoughts are and however I can help. That healing touch makes such a big difference through these difficult times. I'm not telling people what to do. I'm inviting them, right, to kind of come along for the ride, so to speak, if they're willing to, right? When it comes to these non-job related concerns, look, you guys, honestly, Roe v. Wade upset a lot of people in the workplace. I understand it upset me too. But the point is, let's all agree to take it down a notch when dealing with one another. And as the saying goes, each to his own without judgment. What you want for yourself, give to another. And when in doubt, err on the side of compassion. Those are the expectations I have for myself. And those are the expectations I have for all of you. And I want to make sure that we're in control to the extent possible of making our experience here at work better than it could otherwise be if we left these things unsaid. That type of approach, I think, can make a really, really big difference. So just food for thought. Again, nothing rocket science-y here, other than making yourself vulnerable in a healthy sense so that employees can feel like they can do the same. We can't solve everything. There's too many things. It's too much. It's the 24/7 news cycle. You know, it's the world is coming to an end, literally. It's like, stop. It's not coming to an end anytime soon. Okay, let's not get too wild. Let's not get too ahead of us. These are difficult times, though, for a lot of people. As much as we can show compassion in these times, it's going to make a difference. Part 3, the company crisis, everybody, is talent scarcity, creative alternatives for new talent pipelines. Great inflation on performance reviews. We know this is happening out there, right? Of wage and hour crises, class action lawsuits, yikes. Demands for remote and hybrid work are not going away anytime soon. We've got to kind of balance the needs of the workers with the needs of the C-suite. Employee threats to organize and form a union. What do you do during strikes and lockouts? What do you do during union decertification efforts? Action plans to minimize workplace violence, active shooter preparation, surviving M&A, mergers and acquisitions when the company is rumored to be bought. This is all the stuff I wanted to cover in the book. We can't cover them all here today. But what we can talk about today is the global crises, the pandemics, the war declarations, the social unrest, the economic crashes, the inflation, the cost of gasoline, right? Natural disasters. All of this stuff is a disruption that creates a new normal in the workplace. The question for you is, who are you relative to these challenges, and who do you choose to be? That's it, as in everything in life. Who are you relative to that, and who do you choose to be? And when there are exceptionally stressful conditions, understand something. Heroes are only born of disruption to this degree, right? It was World War II that made Audie Murphy, the highest decorated soldier in World War II. Had that war not happened, he might have been a mailman. I have no idea. Nothing against mailmen, right? Or I might have been a plumber. I don't know. But in those circumstances, people who step up clearly stand out. This is an opportunity for us as we go through this post-COVID reintegration phase. Who are we? Who do we choose to be? What kind of influence do we want to have on our organizations? How do we want people to finish that sentence? Oh yeah, I know Paul Falcone, he's what? What are they saying? You don't need a third-party coach. You can do this for yourself. You can coach yourself into this. How do you change? How do you become more flexible, right? How do you show that you're willing to move with the times? The goal in all of these different situations, no matter what kind of disaster comes your way, is to build a leadership framework to formulate your responses based on human emotional needs. Okay, there's the cognitive side of what we know we have to do, and there's the emotional side. And what I will tell you is this: if you truly want to become someone's favorite boss, it's got to come from the emotional side. They've got to feel trust. It's the 2 C's. It's their character and it's their caring. That's what makes someone your favorite boss. They cared about you personally, and it was their character. You respected them. They had your back. You had theirs. Character and caring. That's the solution. No one's leaving for 20% to go somewhere else because they may get Godzilla who spits fire and throws chairs. If they work for someone who they really feel respects them and cares about them and wants for them what they want for them, they ain't going anywhere. And that's the reality. And I think that message gets short shrift out there, and we need to really amplify it. First things first, when catastrophe strikes, tend to the health and safety of your team members immediately. Now, I know that's kind of a commonsensical thing, but this is where you start to build out your templates. Okay, I believe in checklists. The Checklist Manifesto is a book, a bestseller written by Atul Gawande. Talks about how neurosurgeons use checklists, how airline pilots use checklists, how well they work in these kinds of situations. Second, listen to your senior management team, inform yourself of current priorities and resources, including message points that the organization wants all employees to follow and be aware of. And Motion Picture and Television Fund, it wasn't just employees. We had a lot of stakeholders. We had residents and patients. We had those residents and patients' families. We had the union. We had our vendors, right? But you've got to think this stuff out. And doing it on the back of a napkin sometimes really helps. And it's good that you have it, because in an emergency, you're not going to have time to think through this stuff. You're moving too quickly. The adrenaline is going too fast. Third, as the situation begins to normalize, ensure that employees and their families have access to food, water, whatever else they need. At MPTF, we were giving away paper towels, toilet paper, anything we can get our hands on that people couldn't find in the stores because all the shelves were empty. Fourth, as the stabilization phase comes into play, determine where work falls on the spectrum of family and safety, and ensure that your employees understand that we're all in this together. No one left behind. We are all friends and neighbors at times like this, not just coworkers. Put the human element first, keep a healthy perspective. Your staff members are likely going to wrap their minds around and their hearts around, more importantly. Now, in the interest of time, I'm going to skip some of these. Step 1, go to crisis management mode. Step 2, communicate, and over-communicate. We used robocalls where we can send out messages to all the residents, all the patients families. And the robocall would leave a voicemail, a detailed voice message machine from our message from our CEO. If they miss the phone call, they can listen to it. But we kept getting waves and waves of communication out, because that's what's the most critical as you're going through that stage. Step 3, be clear about roles and next steps, right? Assign those willing to volunteer to help others in specific areas or with specific tasks. Very, very important that you allow people to give of themselves. Okay, that's really for the people who enjoy doing that. They will step up, they will motivate themselves. Okay, number 2, disseminate updates regarding on-site work expectations, amended hours of operation, restricted locations. Talk about cleanup, restoration. What are the next steps going to look like? And step 4, normalcy and healing begin as a marathon, not a sprint. Demonstrate empathy, goodwill, and selflessness. You literally need to talk to your managers about this. You've got to make them hear that so that they realize it's safe to do this. We do want to do it naturally, but we think, well, we're managers, we're not supposed to do that. But if they hear it from HR, if they hear it from the business owner, you will be surprised how they will say, okay, if it's okay with Phyllis, it's okay with me. As long as she's okay with it, right? Recognize that humans heal at different speeds and in different ways, right? Be flexible and check on your team's well-being, provide resources to help them and their families navigate through significant change. If you do not have an employee assistance program, an EAP, I've used the Holman Group, Holman, for years. They're based out of, I think, Chatsworth or Northridge, somewhere out there. They're wonderful. It's a per employee per month model. Wonderful to have that resource there for your employees. Again, in terms of your checklist, office hours for the days and weeks ahead, flexibility to work remotely or part-time, how to log time off work due to the disaster, what is excused time off, whether it's okay to bring kids or pets into the office, or, you know, if school is out, how often staff members need to update their supervisor on their availability, how often or which parts of the building or complex are unsafe, not functional, dress codes, are they relaxed? Customer and vendor updates, could be union updates, family updates if you have patients and residents, road conditions, traffic workarounds, and ongoing support from the authorities. We had the National Guard there at NPTF for a month in probably April of 2020. We didn't have enough nurses and physician's assistants. The National Guard sent us their people, thank goodness. But step 5, remember that normalcy and healing begin as a marathon, not a sprint. It all comes down to healing. It comes down to calmness. It comes down to being the voice of reason. And understand that the last bullet there, we talk about, you know, this idea of holistic disaster management. You're looking at everything, but you can't do it on the fly. This does have to be thought through. And it could be a Word doc, it could be an Excel spreadsheet with different tabs, but print it out in case you don't have electricity. And make sure everyone in the department knows where to find it. So that if you're in HR, you're responsible for the personnel pool, right? You have to know how to reach all the employees, whether they're here at work or at home, what their emergency contact information is, where should they report when they come to the campus, et cetera, et cetera. There's no rule book. And the rest of this slide is pretty self-explanatory. Again, keep things as simple as possible. Make it easy for employees to give back to the community by volunteering and donating whatever they can. Allow employees to help others in need. It creates a sense of healing and peace of mind. Never underestimate the power of even the simplest act of kindness. Lead by example. Practice selfless leadership by putting others' needs before your own or ahead of your own. And compassion, empathy, goodwill, and clear communication are really the keys to everything. My contact information is here. Everything except my social security number is on this page. You've got my email, my phone, my website, my LinkedIn, Amazon, HarperCollins, Sherm author page, whatever you want is on this page. So I want to turn it over, Bill, and see if there are any questions that have come up in the last 7 or 8 minutes that we have.
There are a few questions, but before I can even get to the question, I really just want to thank you. I mean, there's just looking at the comments, and sometimes you just know that everybody isn't rapt attention and hanging on your every golden word. And even though I can't see people, even though I'm just looking at names on the list, I sense that. And I think on behalf of everybody, I can say every word of what you had to say really meant a lot to a lot of people, and just the common sense and kind of bringing everything together in a way that I think every picture you paint is very vivid to everybody that's ever sat in an HR seat or actually gone to work and had a workmate, because we know all those people. We experience all those people. So Paul, thank you so much for that. Do want to toss a couple of questions out for you, because I think there are a few that are really good. First of all, your books are translated into many languages, including Spanish, correct?
Not Spanish, no. Chinese is the #1 language, but not Spanish. I think enough people speak Spanish that HarperCollins didn't translate into Spanish. I wish they would, but Chinese, Korean, Vietnamese, all that kind. Yeah, but Turkish, I've got a bunch of them out there, but Spanish, unfortunately, the European countries are not one of them. But thank you, though.
Okay, yeah, I remember seeing all the translations. So a couple of questions that came up. So, and I think a couple that are particularly good. So when you're in some of these deep discussions, what happens if you've got that really, maybe it's a different kind of toxic. They're not looking to make things difficult for everybody. They're looking to make things difficult for the organization. In other words, they are very litigious. and they're going to file a complaint right away, and you know what that means. You know where they're trying to go with it. Is there a roadmap for dealing with that kind of person who, it doesn't matter how well thought out and how well meaning everything you say is, they're in it for one thing?
Yeah, it's a great question, Bill. The 101 Tough Conversations book that I had written pretty much addresses these kinds of things, but we've touched on it here. When we go back to the slide that talks about performance versus conduct, right? The circle. You can use that in combination with this idea of perception, right? Holding people accountable for their own perception management to have any kind of conversation that you want. And you can talk to someone about, Sarah, I need to share something with you. I want you to partner with me. I'd like you to kind of step up and be at the helm of this. We're going through a lot. You've been here. You're the most tenured person on the team. And if you can join me in this in a spirit of good faith, and people can feel like you and I are in lockstep, I think that's going to make a really big difference. What are your thoughts? So try and get ahead of it proactively. Step number 2 is, if that's not working and you still feel resistance from this person, you can talk about, from the conduct standpoint, perception, and I'm entitled to my perception, is that you're resistant to these changes that I'm trying to make. Now, you don't have to believe everything that I say, but I also can't have you tear down the rest of the team either. So I'm going to hold you accountable for the perceptions that you're creating. And the perception that I have is that I'm getting stiff resistance from you right now when all of us need to be putting our best foot forward. What are your thoughts? Tell me, am I missing the point here? And I'm going to open up that can of worms right there, and I'm going to call them on it. I do not shy away from those things. I do it respectfully. But the reality becomes, look, at a time of crisis, this is not the time to, stamp your feet and say, well, I'm not playing in this game anymore, blah, blah, blah. It's like, no, we're all in this together. Are you in it? Do you really see your peers right now as people that you want to help? Do you see me as someone you want to help? And if you don't, let's talk about that, because maybe this isn't the right place for you. I don't know. You need to tell me. But those kinds of conversations I have had, and it's not what you say, but it's how you say it. I'm not judging them. I'm not making them feel bad about themselves. I'm just being very objective. From my vantage point, it does appear that I'm facing, stiff resistance from you. And I don't think that's fair under these circumstances, but maybe I'm missing something. Tell me your thoughts. Like every other case, Bill, with bullying, when you push that kid back up against the fence, they're not going to bother you anymore. Bullies only go after the ones who they think they could push up against the fence and then push again and then push again, and they're not going to do anything. I'm a very, very nice person, but I have very high expectations. And I think we all need to get in that mindset. And operational leaders need to know what their rights are. And the truth of the matter is, their employees are responsible for both their performance and their conduct. I don't care how good their sales numbers are or anything else. They're responsible for the bottom half of that circle. And you can use that circle as a great tool to explain to people with a little pictogram what your expectations are, especially at a time when it's so difficult for everyone else on the team.
One last question then, and I think this is kind of looking at a common denominator, perhaps, that could be an additional challenge. Are there any nuances with when you're dealing with virtual employees? Because we're looking at the different generations, we're looking at different groups, but virtual versus in person, anything that you would recommend different?
Yeah, managing virtual employees has to be a lot more deliberate, purposeful, focused. You don't get the pleasure of seeing them at the water cooler or in the break room. So you've got to build that time into your schedule. It really, really is that important. And so with your direct reports, assuming you have 4 to 8 people in the span of control, do it once a week, 30 minutes once a week with your employees, maybe once every other week, depending on how big the group is. But spend that dedicated time with them and listen. As I say, listen with your eyes and with your heart, in addition to your ears. Your job is to listen to where they're coming from and how they're feeling and how you can help. And to the degree that you can put that forward, Bill, I think it's going to make a tremendous difference.
Excellent. No, that's a good piece of advice too about the regular meetings too. Sometimes we forget, when we're not face to face with people. I'm going to leave it at that for Paul and for today's WeLu. Paul, I can't thank you enough for being part of our WeLu again, and for everything that you bring to the HR community, to us that are gathered here today, but also to everybody that has the opportunity to read your books and and your articles and everything that you share and contribute to making the workplace a better place for everybody. So on behalf of everybody here today, I want to thank you for that. And then I want to
Bill, thank you. And thank you for letting me talk about my new book as an author. It's really kind of cool. So I appreciate that. And everyone, thank you for sitting in. I know it's been a long day for you all. I hope you got something out of this session, that something you can use back in the office tomorrow. But thanks for entertaining me and bringing me in to do the closing keynote today. I really appreciate it.